evening, everyone. My name is Nandita Bajaj, and I'm the Executive Director of Population Balance, an organization that educates and offers solutions to address the impacts of human overpopulation and overconsumption on the planet, people, and animals. I also work at Antioch University through the Institute for Humane Education, where I research and study pronatalism and human supremacy and their impacts on human rights, animal protection, and environmental sustainability efforts. I was born and raised in India, and I moved to Canada when I was in my late teens. And my parents afforded me a lot of personal autonomy to pursue whatever paths I wanted to choose in life. And these included pursuing a career in aerospace engineering, becoming a high school educator, and even marrying outside of my religion and race. However, despite my relative independence, the one thing I never questioned was the inevitability of motherhood. It wasn't until my late 20s when my partner, now husband, and I started discussing our future plans that the subject of kids came up, and we both realized that neither of us wanted to have children. I was 28 years old, and to learn that I had the choice to not have children was extremely powerful and liberating. It was a moment of profound awakening for me, one that determined the rest of my life path. So I wondered how many more people there were around the world who were, like me, raised to believe that parenthood was their destiny. And for those who really wanted to embark upon parenthood, what degree of autonomy were they afforded to decide with whom and when to have children? I learned through research and through interviews with people around the world that there's a name for this strong force, and it's called pronatalism. Pronatalism is the social and institutional bias towards having children, based on the false idea that we all are biologically wired to procreate, and that parenthood is the rite of passage to adulthood. Pronatalism leads to unrelenting pressures experienced primarily by women to have children and large families. Having a child, for example, is one of the most important decisions that we make in our lives, and it can be a truly joyful and meaningful life path. But we know from research that the procreative desire, the desire to embark upon parenthood, is not universal, but rather falls on a spectrum. There are those who have strong desires, there are those who have no interest in it whatsoever, and there are a lot of options in between. But pronatalism, through applying this pressure of forcing everyone to enter parenthood, severely undermines reproductive autonomy and can lead to a lot of confusion, suffering, and reproductive injustice. It can also really undermine our ability to seek meaning in our lives and to find fulfillment the way we define it, whether that includes children or doesn't include children. Pronatalism begins in the family, where there are pressures experienced primarily by women to carry on the family's legacy or traditions. Women who do not or cannot have children can be subjected to violence, divorce, or social stigmatization. In low and middle income countries, pronatalism is captured best through the fact that there are over 200 million girls and women who have an unmet need for contraception. And while this phenomenon might be assumed to arise from a lack of contraceptive availability, it's actually largely driven by oppressive pronatalist norms that come through family pressures in the form of opposition to use of contraceptives, or through sexual violence or reproductive coercion. Popular media and culture also play a huge role in perpetuating pronatalist beliefs. There's no shortage of women's magazines, product advertising, social media chatter, celebrity gossip that glorifies and sentimentalizes pregnancy and parenthood. Even though the notion of the so-called biological clock or the maternal instinct has been debunked many times over, These myths continue to be perpetuated within popular media. And this fixation with family, as defined by the presence of biological children, can really stigmatize those who do not fit the dominant narrative, including single people, including child-free and childless adults, LGBTQIA folks, adoptive families, and many others. These pressures also stigmatize those folks whose experience of family has been traumatic, or who don't have the right number of children as dictated by their cultural norms. For example, people who do not have children may be frequently reminded that they may regret this decision. Hardly ever do we hear the stories of parents who actually regret having children. A lot of research is showing that parenthood regret, though highly stigmatized and fraught with feelings of guilt and shame, are very real for many. Pronatalism also rears its ugly head through the medical institution, where reminders from family physicians about your ticking biological clock, or refusal from surgeons to perform a tubal ligation for women who don't have any children, can lead to further lack of reproductive autonomy, even for those of us living in liberal societies. Even within the sexual and reproductive health and rights community, there is a tendency to conflate reproductive health care with maternal care, leaving out the possibility that there are those who may not or could not have children. Economy-driven pressures also show up through alarmist narratives of a baby bust, which threatens the economy, in which women are failing to fulfill their duty to produce the next generation of workers and consumers. Tactics such as lump sum baby bonuses, tax credits for large families, abortion bans, and sanctioning reproductive health care services in order to increase the fertility rate to stave off dangers of the aging crisis or to grow the GDP. Politically driven pressures show up in very similar ways, except for politicians, as we saw earlier, the motivations can be ethnocentric, it can be nationalistic, it can be xenophobic, or it can be to increase your taxpayer base or to increase the military. Whatever the reason, the essence of pronatalism is that it reduces individuals to reproductive vessels for external agendas. All of these pressures are like the water in which we are swimming and really obfuscate our own decision-making power. Pronatalism can often result in coercive methods, and its effects are most strongly felt by those who are the most marginalized, people with the least degree of personal and reproductive autonomy. We are familiar with the history of reproductive coercion through past and also some current population control methods, such as forced sterilization and forced abortion campaigns, in order to restrict the fertility of certain communities. These methods and these programs are based on the legacy of institutional racism, sexism, ableism, nationalism, and classism. It's understandable why there has been a discomfort to broach the topic of the population connection and its impact on human rights and environmental justice. Not only were these programs gross violations of reproductive rights, they also tainted any positive sustainable population advocacy methods, such as the miracle that happened here in Thailand through the Condom King. So Mr. Michai Viravaidya, who's one of the organizers of this conference, he was concerned by the poor plight of his citizens due to the pressure of population in Thailand. And he brought about one of the most successful family planning programs in the history of sustainable population advocacy efforts, in which he managed to lower the fertility rate in Thailand from approximately 6 to under 2 in a matter of a couple of decades. And it ended up improving the lives of millions of people. So the de-emphasis on the population connection, though well-intentioned, has come with its own set of unintended consequences. For example, we know that pronatalism, in its most coercive forms, has been existent in our cultures for centuries. But the silencing of the population connection has allowed it to emerge with a lot more strength. So right now, coercive pronatalism is more pervasive, it's more prevalent, and an equally egregious form of reproductive and population control as the policies of the past and present that seek to restrict fertility. Pronatalism is also at the heart of our population growth. So coming from that place, we have to understand that even the 8 billion milestone that we reached yesterday really is no cause for celebration, given that pronatalism and population growth itself is premised on a high degree of social and reproductive injustice. And let's not forget that any arguments that deny the role of population on our environmental catastrophes that we're facing right now largely stem from a place of human supremacy, a belief where we see humans as superior to all other beings on Earth. And we see nature and all other species existing just for our purposes. And we see the climate catastrophe, for example, and the biodiversity collapse are both results of human expansionism that has occurred over the last 200 years. So in terms of our evolutionary history, it took us 300,000 years to reach the first billion humans. And then in just 200 years, we have expanded our numbers to 8 billion. And that increase in number has been compounded with a 100-fold increase in our consumption. Now, very important to note that the human expansionism has led to the harms and the causes that are experienced inequitably across the globe. And we absolutely need to address the role that we play in the consumption population debate. Yet, we also need to recognize that collectively as a human species, we are in a state of gross ecological overshoot, where we are straining the planet's ecosystems faster than their ability to regenerate. So clearly, human expansionism is not only a cause of incredible social and ecological crises that we face right now, it's also premised on social and reproductive injustice. And that's why, after working in the fields of engineering and education for over a decade, I recently switched my careers completely in order to dedicate all my efforts to this issue. At Population Balance, which is where I work right now, we advocate for a shift to an ecocentric worldview, which demands that we radically transform our relationship to the planet from one of dominion to one of reverence and stewardship. And that shift requires that we scale back our human enterprise through rights-based, empowering, and sustainable strategies. One of those will be our concerted efforts to neutralize pronatalism, so everyone, everywhere can truly decide whether, when, and with whom they can have children and realize their true fulfillment in life. Lastly, at Population Balance, we create a safe environment within which to have these important, bold, compassionate, and solution-oriented conversations. A couple of the programs that we offer are classroom visits to schools, colleges, and conferences. We run a popular podcast called the Overpopulation Podcast, which recently featured the Condom King. And I also offered through Antioch the only course of its kind called Pronatalism, Overpopulation, and the Planet, which is an online graduate course open to anyone in the world. I hope I'll have a chance to engage with many of you through some of these programs, and I thank you for your time.